So, Matt, Camille, thanks so much for joining us, Collision from Home. We've seen structural problems really exacerbated in this pandemic. It's entrenched a whole bunch of inequalities in the world, from tech billionaires accumulating literally hundreds of billions more in wealth, through to people of color in particular losing their jobs, sometimes their lives, and really not having a lot of wealth to begin with. Camille, maybe can I start with you by asking you what you think is the most pressing problem that big tech needs to address, or that others need to force a solution onto big tech with right at this moment?
Mm. Well, big tech has big problems. So that's a big question. But in terms of how people of color are affected by big tech, one of the things that comes to mind first is censorship. Just recently, I remember reading a story about Sean King, who's an African-American, but very well-known activist, who is problematic for the Black community on his own. But in this instance, he posted a screenshot of a racist email that he received on Facebook. And then his account was, he got banned from Facebook. Now, because interestingly, he had been a speaker at Facebook earlier in the year. And so he had a personal connection there and was able to get it restored within a couple of hours. But he then went on to say, you know what, this was a realization for me that you don't own anything. And Facebook, allowed me to use their page, and it can, with the stroke of a keyboard, it could all go away. And so I've had countless friends who've experienced the same thing, who don't have the type of power that that the relationships that Sean King has. Their posts have been taken down for talking about their own experiences with racism. But yet, when other people post actual racist things, it seems as if those things are allowed to stay up. So there's a level of inequality there that is always flagged, but Facebook hasn't quite been able to figure out how to manage it.
And what's your reaction when someone like Mark Zuckerberg says he's personally opposed to the racist and policing rhetoric of President Trump, yet he allows his platform to publish all of that content?
Yeah, I think it echoes a lot of the hypocrisy I'm seeing now in the wake of the global Black Lives Matters protest from a lot of CEOs, in the sense that they've been making, there's these wave of statements that we're seeing. Like we're seeing, when I saw Alex Ohanian from Reddit step down from his board and say, hey, hire a Black person. And he's being applauded for leading an example for CEOs. And really, it's a cowardly act, because he, instead of staying in his own company and trying to make changes, instead he resigns and says, oh, please hire a Black person, as if that's going to help and solve all the problems. So to me, there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. Mark Zuckerberg is the most powerful editor in the entire world. I think he has to come to terms with the fact that Facebook is a media company. It is a publishing company. It controls the news of the world. That's just a fact right now. And that in itself is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Now, Matt, one of the popular solutions or alternatives...
I like what you had to say.
We can do plus ones. Now, Matt, is it a solution simply to break up these companies, or are there further steps that need to be undertaken? Don't we need regulatory oversight of algorithms as well, or clearer regulation on the sort of content that can go up on platforms?
Yeah, I mean, it's the basic problem with these companies, and I would just take Facebook and Google, is that they make money through clickbait. That's what, it's not that it's not that Mark Zuckerberg is a good or bad guy, and we shouldn't be debating the right way for Mark Zuckerberg to censor. We should be wondering why it is that he makes money when people post violent, conspiratorial, false content, sometimes super racist, but sometimes, anti-vaxxer stuff, or, and in lots of different languages too. So this isn't just happening in America. It's just that it's most noticeable here. But the fundamental issue is it's a business model problem. These guys make money with divisive false content, right? So you don't need to say, hey, they should censor Alex Jones. You just need YouTube not to recommend Alex Jones 15 billion times with its algorithm, right? So that's like what we're dealing with here is a business model problem. And the one thing that they don't want to talk about, and this is fundamentally what these guys are, is they don't want to talk about advertising money. They want to talk about privacy. They want to talk about free speech. They want to talk about censorship. They want to talk about everything but advertising money. And these guys are advertising giants. And there's a lot of manipulation and discrimination and bad things that are going on the platforms. But no, let's make sure to recognize they are also destroying the local newspapers and the niche publishers that actually have trusted audiences. So you've seen this, Black newspapers have been totally devastated, but so have local newspapers. So have, academic niche, publishers. So has, bicycling newspapers. Anybody that does niche, that has a niche audience that's trusted, has been undermined by these guys because their fundamental business model is anti-competitive. I mean, I can go into details as to why, but the answer is, what do you do about it? Well, okay, we can get into details, but the answer has to be, don't let them make money through clickbait. Change the model of advertising so that you make money, you generate revenue based on creating trusted information for audiences, not so that you intrusively surveil people, manipulate them, and sell clickbait.
Mm-hmm. Now, maybe let's shift, because we're slightly on this ground already, onto the hidden costs and sometimes benefits of tech and their social contribution.
Can I just make one last point about it?
Yes, of course.
I really think that it's important to stop caring about what Mark Zuckerberg thinks or says or does, or what Larry Page or these other guys. These guys are not going to change the problem. If Mark Zuckerberg didn't exist, we'd have to invent him. This is a public policy problem. We need our public policymakers to act, because these companies exist because our governments haven't governed. So we have to stop doing sit downs with Mark Zuckerberg and saying, hey, be less racist, and start saying to our public policymakers, break up Facebook and regulate the remnants, so we don't have to deal with this profit via clickbait and surveillance.
I agree 100%. We can't rely on these companies to regulate themselves. We just can't.
100%. You won't get arguments from me there. One thing that we often ignore is the aspects of our data being used for profit, the innovation that never occurs because big players buy up their potential or their real competition and then kill those players, or they're sidelined effectively. And there's also the fact that the world's biggest tech companies, probably with the exception of Amazon and maybe Apple, they just don't employ that many people. What else can we do to extract social value from these companies? Is it the regulatory antitrust play that you're saying, Matt, or is it something else that we need to do, like taxing them, consumer boycotts? I see there's a detox Facebook campaign gathering steam this month, or maybe it's something else?
So this is not an or problem, right? It's not taxing them or unionizing or changing their legal structure or antitrust. It's an and problem. Right? They need to be unionized. I mean, Apple employs a lot of people. They just happen to be employed through subcontractors in China. So they employ about 1 million people making their machines. Those are employees of Foxconn. So, that's a legal question, but so are, there are antitrust questions there are around their control of an app store, where you have similar, censorship problems, but you also have problems with anti-competitive behavior. And there are privacy issues. What we need to do, what we did during the New Deal in the 1930s when addressing these concentrations of power, is it wasn't so much about any particular regulatory or policy solution. It was basically a fight over who governs, right? And all of the creation of the administrative state, the creation of labor unions, and I'm speaking from an American context because there were bad things that happened elsewhere in the 30s. But basically, we erected a set of public agencies and public financing channels to take power from the robber barons that existed then. They were the Mellons and the Rockefellers and the Morgans, but they organized our culture in a somewhat similar way that big tech and private equity does today. So really, it's about displacing the power that these guys have with public institutions. And you have a whole bunch of different mechanisms to do that. But essentially, it's essentially about protecting the producers, the people that make things for a living, that write things, that are artists, that are engineers, that are workers, and disempowering the monopolists and the financiers, basically the middlemen that extend these deep managerial controls into most of the economy and undermine, people who work for a living in communities.
Mm-hmm. Camille, structural change is on the way.
I just want to add on to that point, Matt, excellent point, that we have been conditioned to believe that our privacy has no value, has no inherent value. And there's an idea that we give up our privacy to access these platforms for free. But in effect, I think radical idea, either Facebook, for example, should be paying us for our information, or really we need to be paying for these services instead of accessing them for free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the business model of them giving something for free, not like a media outlet or TV channel, but something that you need to communicate with your friends or family or to get vital information, like the services that they offer, which are essentially essential communication services, they should be requiring that people pay them for that, not taking the payment by manipulating us on the back end, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like if on Saturday night I'm going to sit down at 8 o'clock and say I'm going to watch a YouTube video, and then all of a sudden it's 10:30 and I didn't mean to waste my evening that way, or if I get radicalized by watching these kinds of or get misinformation, that's me paying, and Google's going to make 30 cents off of that or something based on advertising. I should have the choice about whether to consume that. And that means that I should be paying. That's how we allow people to make choices, is in the market with prices. And what these guys have done by offering these zero price tools and then surveilling us and manipulating us and selling advertising is that they have broken those price signals. And that is, they are manipulating us by breaking the price signals that let us decide whether we want to buy goods and services. And you're seeing a totally dysfunctional society now. I mean, there are a lot of legacy problems here that are unrelated to the platforms, but these guys have entrenched and made a lot of these problems worse because their business model is basically corrupt and based on self-dealing.
And I can tell you from direct experience that when Sheryl Sandberg, the Facebook COO, is challenged about that exact point, it gets turned into an either or, that either Facebook would disappear from the planet if you charged people, or their current model would bring enlightenment to the world. And it does seem like there is a third way there. Camille, Matt, thank you so much. You've been watching Collision from Home.